Ah, hello guys, hi, welcome to stream. ഇന്നത്തെ ടൈറ്റിൽ എനിക്ക് വേറെ ഒന്നും കിട്ടിയില്ല, അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇതെടുത്തിട്ടാണ്. ദിസ് വാസ് സംതിങ് ദാറ്റ് ഐ വാണ്ടഡ് ടു ടോക്ക് അബൌട്ട്. സോ സം വീക്സ് ബാക്ക് there was a discussion regarding online education and shit. And what happened was pretty much what do you say? Everyone was like, yeah, offline education good, online education bad. പക്ഷേ here's the weird thing, right? Like, I felt like when I had a retrospect of this. And hero, when I had a retrospect of this, what do we need? What do we need? Yeah, Hunter, Guardian, the Warrior, Assassino.
Yowza.
Sure. Yeah, as I was saying, when we think of a concept, it's very weird when people, like, the entire reasoning that they said that this was good and this was bad was pretty much off the point. എന്താ പറയല്, it's like they were talking about a completely different thing. It's like, okay, I get it, this is an aspect of education, but then most people were like, yeah, if online education was a thing, then this was bad. Like, students won't develop social skills, right, as they used to. And then they were like, yeah, then they won't study, they don't do their homework. And it's like, okay, granted, education is something that encapsulates all of these, but then the entire point of education is not this. Like, it feels so here's the thing, here's my perspective on this specific topic. When you have offline, if you're going to talk about this offline education thing, knowledge can only be weighed till 100% of a specific topic. Yes, correct. I mean, there's no people, I don't know why. It's like, what do you say? Yeah, you have this entire concept where it's like you can only gauge someone based on a specific topic at that moment of time, and that too only 100% of whatever it is. It feels weird once you, I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid and I don't grasp what's happening, but yeah, I think it's because maybe I'm just stupid.
Fake colors.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I think it might be because I'm thinking of it in a very dumb way. Yes, that was like the okay. Because, okay, so here's the thing.
Best of luck.
When, as I previously said, usually when you want to gauge someone in an offline academic system, not education, academic system, what people usually tend to do is people usually tend to evaluate them on a 100% basis. But the thing is, for offline, right, you can do more.
That one's on me.
Like, even if you're not restricted to a syllabus, it's curiosity that carries it. I'm not saying that offline cannot have it, like the offline model cannot have it as well, but it feels like the main point that people do want to.
Fan. Kitty dog incoming.
Victory begins here. First blood. The best things come in pairs.
Love that.
Anyways, now I change to video. I don't know why I want to make it. I just want to make subtitles.
Be right back. Kitty, get him. Oh, my favorite color is purple.
Ultimate is down. Stand in our way
Love
again.
Okay. What's everything going on?
Even as your allies fail you, seek opportunities to turn the battle.
Yeah, Madam Brigitte this.
Stand in our way again.
Oh, my fave colors.
Why ally yourself with someone so good? An enemy has been slain.
Woo, baby, what a rush!
You wavered. And paid the ultimate price.
She lied to me! She lied when I had nothing left! Hello? Operator? She lied to us! I believed in you! I don't know.
Will find the location of our hidden underground podcasting base. Hey, Surfshark is so secure that I bet you can plan your whole trip from
Stand in our way again.
Well, you be what? With Surfshark, you can break into a lot.
Aren't they brilliant? Shut her away.
An enemy has been slain.
Let the good times roll.
Otherwise be served. Wow, now I'm really convinced. Radicalize these. Where can I get
Love
this
that.
Surfshark? Just head to the link below for an exclusive Black Friday.
Arendite. Actually, Arendite
Enter promo
ചെയ്യാൻ
code ordinary
Arendite
things
ഇതിന്
for up
ആവശ്യമില്ല,
to an additional
because
6 months completely free. Get
Stand in our way again.
There's no elegant way to say this, so I'm saying.
This will be a nice little
no outside help, you'll want
An enemy has been slain.
Ideally, most of your future subjects will live rurally and also
An
probably
ally has been
be
slain.
This will
Oh,
ensure
look.
minimal resistance
More work
outside
for you to
Capital
do.
City. But your citizens still should know what's going on in the wider
That
world.
one's on
Getting
me.
their information from old school
ഇതൊരു ചെറിയ
mass media
ബഗ്ഗാണല്ലോ.
television,
Babe
radio.
colors.
Otherwise, how will they know that you're the boss now?
Ah,
Now, states
okay.
explicitly
Found it on the
protected by a
plane.
larger regional power are a no. East Germany 53, Grenada 83, Yemen 2014. All examples of attempted coups or uprisings that failed because they were foiled by a larger, more powerful country stepping in, either by killing the cousters or, in Yemen's case, plunging the country into a decade-long and I like to call it the French exception. France has historically run these countries so shittily that they are structurally susceptible to military muscle. Let me explain. Chad, Gabon, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Burkina Faso all have at least one
Why ally yourself with someone
these
so
countries
weak?
have some unique structures that make them eminently and they're all located in the Sahel, a mostly arid band of continent-spanning countries where the only thing that crops up consistently is coups.
Love
For the last 20 years, especially for the last 10 months, there have been several cookie-cutter coups in the Sahel, where military strongmen are opposing military less strongmen with a fighting average better than the going global rate.
Looks like we have a fearless
2023
warrior on our
alone,
hands.
The region has
Killing
seen
spree.
5 coup attacks, 2 of which brought new regimes to power. And that's because
Looks like we have a fearless warrior on our hands. Killing spree.
So, what does Europe's biggest loser have to do with all this? Well, during France's chaotic decolonisation
An ally
process,
has been
it set
slain.
up porous, contested borders that tribal loyalties of the region. But in some material ways, France never really left its former colonies. The most common currency in the coup belt is still the Fiat franc, pegged to the euro and controlled by the French finance ministry. And French military garrisons are still dotted around like cannabis dispensaries in a South Cali circle. Most damning of all, the outgoing colonial power set up
Ah,
An enemy has been slain. Stand in our way again.
natural resources and upfront
An enemy has been slain.
military battle.
Stand in our way again. The best things come in pairs.
2009 and stayed in place largely because of his cozy relationship with
Until
France.
next
The
time.
French military presence kept Bongo's regime solid, while French oil companies shut down the line. France got cheap oil, while the Bongo family bought up some of France's most expensive oil. This is all to say, the Sahel rolls. Your day. This is the region where your coup is most likely to succeed. One, you can just cross the border and try but if all this Sahel business seems to be and you want to coup somewhere with some drinkable tap water, a bit more crack work.
An enemy has been slain.
Just because you'll be skipping the election portion of coming to power, that doesn't mean you want to
Stand in our way again.
vegetables. blood a fine wagyu that is staging the coup
Falling
itself.
back!
On September the 11th, 1973,
Looks like we have a fearless
democratically
warrior on our
elected
hands.
Salvador
Killing
Allende
spree.
was deposed in a US-backed coup. This coup really had it all. The theatrical flair, the speed, the efficiency, and the bombing of a presidential palace with a fighter jet. But before the country got to this point, it took years of prep work, and this is what you should be taking note of. The first thing you're going to want to do is grind the economy to a halt, or at least continue so far
Looks like we have a
agrees that
An enemy has been
they wanted
slain.
to make the economy real.
Looks like we have a warrior on our hands.
And global inflation.
Until next time!
CIA also covertly funded the devastating 1973
Like stand in our way
The
again.
Chilean government was forced to turn on money to prevent the total collapse of Libya, sending inflation soaring to 133%.
Until next time!
Allende's once popular administration while those
Even as your allies fail you, seek opportunities to turn the battle. An ally has been slain.
The coup was led by General Pinochet and a junta of generals overthrowing their paymaster with the necessary steps. He ruled for nearly 16 years, during which he tens of thousands
Stand in our way again.
Political polarization are all telltale signs
Double
that
kill.
your coup could be victorious. When you think that you're the big man now, you don't want people to watch. This fucking guy. So before you do your coup,
Oh no! No!
get
back Stand in our way
completely
again.
anonymous, but you also don't
blows,
want to make
two
it
deaths.
obvious to the current leadership that you're campaigning for their job. Hugo Chavez took a novel approach to fixing his
What?
military installation.
Aliya, I did most of it.
I'd give this coup 10 points for style and general performance. Actions switch sides. When an armored vehicle attempted to ram the palace door down, they were attacked by
Stand in our way again.
three presidential bodyguards. And the president himself
An enemy has been slain.
forced him to appear on television, telling him to announce that the coup was over in the hope that he could quell the chaos, which he did.
Ah,
He also
seriously.
used it as an opportunity to address the public.
Nosotros acá en Caracas no logramos controlar el poder. Ustedes lo hicieron muy bien por allá, pero ya es tiempo.
The unpopular establishment had just given the cocky Chavez an opportunity to campaign. After a brief stint in jail, he continued his charm offensive into electoral politics. He was democratically elected president, much to the annoyance of the United States.
Really, KD ഇവനാണോ ഇത്?
He turned a failed coup into a spectacular success. But he is the exception rather than the rule. Many a military siege has failed because generals overestimate their popularity among the portion of the population that aren't paid to salute them every morning. In 1961, France was in danger of being couped itself, as the country was divided over how hard they should continue to crush the French colony of Algeria. After nearly 7 years of war with the National Liberation Front, President Charles de Gaulle was sick of it all and was basically prepping to grant the colony independence. Most of France agreed, but someone had forgotten to ask these 4 retired French generals. Supported by a few army units, the generals made a big deal out of capturing key sites in Algiers, winning the support of
വേറെന്ത് നോക്കട്ടെ. ഇറങ്ങിയായിരുന്നോ? Okay, sure.
Hey, and we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show we give you.
കാണുന്നുണ്ട്. How I finished my gaming career. Yeah, this is actually
The Drew Gooden channel is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
new YouTube channel. Lady Barback in the
Hey guys. It's not that fun. So you may know I'm not the biggest fan of laugh tracks. A couple years ago I made a video called Efficiency in Comedy, where I not only complained about how unnatural the sound of canned laughter feels while watching a show, but I also tested a theory I had had for a long time, which is that laugh tracks don't just grate my ears and make me roll my eyes, but they also lessen the amount of jokes you can fit in a show by creating dead space in between lines. So when I took an episode of Friends, for example, and edited out all the segments where no one was talking because it was the audience's turn to make noise, it worked out to be over 5 minutes long. And when the entire episode is only 21 minutes, that means you're looking at about a quarter of it having no substance at all. And I know that comedy is not a race. It's not about having the most jokes, it's about having good jokes. If the goal was just to fit as many jokes as you could into like 10 seconds, you would just say them all at the same time. And something tells me that wouldn't work. So that idea kept eating away at me until I finally took on the experiment. 2 episodes of Friends, 2 episodes of The Office, 1 pen and paper, 3 cups of coffee, 1 mental breakdown, and a whole lot of pressing pause. Once I was done, I counted up all the jokes and was able to determine that yes, in fact, the show without laugh tracks had more jokes per minute, which means my hypothesis was correct, and comedy is now objective thanks to Matt. Alright, good night everyone. Except, not really, because I wasn't very thorough. I chose 2 random episodes of 2 different shows to try and prove my point, and I don't think that was enough. Every time I think back on that video, I think about an idea that I was really excited to test, but I kind of half-assed my way into the conclusion that I wanted to have from the beginning. So I decided to do this again, but bigger. 6 different shows, 3 episodes per show, 12 cups of coffee, and about 7 hours of my life I'll never forget. Here's how I didn't just want to choose more shows this time, I also wanted to try and choose different types of shows. It's the same 2 categories as before, but I feel like there's a differentiation. So let's start with
what?
It's fair to say that Parks and Rec are underrated, but I do still feel like it's underappreciated because it was forever been stuck in the shadow of its older, more popular cousin. Like The Office, Parks and Rec was an NBC mockumentary that has continued to thrive into its second life on Netflix. Something I actually contribute partly to reaction gifs on the internet. The characters in this show are so strong that you can look at the silent, moving image of Ron Swanson without ever having watched an episode and know exactly who he is. And now you gotta know more about this guy, so you might as well watch all 126 episodes. Add in a bunch of home run casting choices and a perfectly satirized fictional town, and you end up with one of the funniest shows I've ever watched. Because of the fast pace of Parks and Rec, I expected to have the most jokes per episode of any of the ones on the list, but we'll see. I used 2 different random number generators to pick the episodes I'll be watching, which is what I'll be doing for the rest of the shows as well. Up next, Malcolm in the Middle. When I was like 9, my parents came home one day with season 1 of the show on DVD. I didn't want to watch it because for some reason my dumb kid brain got this confused with Miracle in Lane 2, a Disney Channel movie where Frankie Muniz rolled goes down a hill. Luckily, that's not what the DVD was, and we did watch it, and I fell in love. For the next few years, I would rewatch these episodes over and over again, wishing I could somehow watch the rest of the show, because I guess I was too stupid to realize they were still airing it on TV. I always thought my parents were lying when they said they couldn't buy season 2 on DVD, but years later I found out it was never released. Turns out it would have cost Fox too much money to pay for the music licenses from the show, and so after the first season, they never even bothered. Anyway, I watched season 1 when I was 9, and reruns of season 2 through 7 in high school. This show, even in spite of the fact that 1/3 of every episode feels like a weak distraction, it's sometimes hard to get invested. Don't get me wrong, I love Francis as a character. I loved when he would come home and have interactions with the rest of the family. So it's tempting to just fast forward through whatever he's got going on. I think the reason this stands out so much is because it wasn't about a perfect family where things always work out. It's about these realistic, flawed characters who butt heads and end up in believably bad situations. A lot of the time, the humor comes from how things don't work out, even when it seemed like they would. That being said, I feel like Malcolm in the Middle is more of a slow burn rather than an onslaught of punchlines, so I'm curious to see how many jokes there are here compared to the rest of the shows. The final single-camera show I'm including is Schitt's Creek. The reason I'm choosing this one is because I've never watched it. I feel like if I only chose shows I loved, then I might come off as biased, and the whole point of this is to try and do the opposite. The only thing I know about Schitt's Creek is that one time they paid me $500 to make a Vine about it, but then everyone who did one had to post it on the same day, and it was a total disaster. But hopefully the show is good. It seems like a great cast, so I have pretty high expectations. Alright, moving on to multicams. Let's start with the one that I think stands out most on this list, the IT Crowd. Well, I guess it doesn't actually stand out that much. It's just the only British show on here, and that makes it different. It's also probably the most conceptually simple out of all the shows on here. It's just 3 people who work in an IT department, and sometimes they do things. The season 2 premiere is probably my favorite episode of any show ever. The way the writers weave each story together so that every character's plotline builds individually, but then they all collide at the end in the most beautiful way. It is perfect. It's one of the rare times in my life that I didn't even mind the studio audience laughing along and applauding at the end because it felt so earned. I think the most memorable episodes of TV have this long, slow crescendo from start to finish, and the IT Crowd usually perfected that. Up next, How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother premiered around the time when single-camera shows were starting to have more success, and I think the general population was just about ready to move on from the old format. Because of that, the show feels like it has a foot in the door of both. It is technically a multi-camera sitcom, but the laugh track is really quiet but not too intrusive. It's like the studio audience is just whispering in the corner, like, don't worry guys, we're still here, but we're gonna keep it down. I haven't watched this show since it first aired, but I really enjoyed it at the time. They were definitely going for like a Modern Friends vibe, and I think they do a pretty good job. Like every successful show, the reason How I Met Your Mother works so well is because the writing is good and the characters are very well done. I don't know if I'll enjoy it as much as I used to, but I guess I'll find it. Finally, The Big Bang Theory. That's right, baby. I brought out The Big Bang. What, you thought I would make a video about laugh tracks and not talk about the smash? You were dead wrong. Is the pinnacle of both entertainment as well as humankind.
Yay!
How those things make them different. I'm actually kind of excited to watch a few episodes of the show because it has so much lore around it at this point that I'm thinking there's no way for this to representation. Surely all laugh at one time, right? Regardless of how I feel about them, though, I'm anticipating quite a bit of them. They might actually pull off an upset considering how often the studio audience starts going apeshit. This is probably a good time to talk about the scoring system real quick. That was another thing I don't think I clarified well enough when I did this originally. I just started counting jokes all willy-nilly without ever defining what I viewed as a joke. So for multicams, it's pretty straightforward. If the audience laughs, a joke has been made. Every once in a while, something flies under the radar, but my thought process is, if a choice was made by the writers that was meant to elicit a laugh, it counts as a joke. Sometimes lines have more than one joke in them because of the way they're worded. Sometimes a facial reaction or a body movement counts as a joke. It really just depends on the situation. If it's a show without a laugh track, I just try to imagine where the laughs would be inserted if there was.
I am voting for you.
You're not voting for yourself?
Leslie, you can't vote for yourself, I don't think. Pretty sure that's illegal. That's so funny.
Keep in mind, if you don't like my scoring system, you're more than welcome to try this out yourself. All you have to do is whip out a notebook and take all the fun out of watching TV. Best part of the video coming up, I'm about to say a bunch of numbers. On Parks and Rec, first episode, I counted 133 jokes in 21 minutes, then 169 jokes in 27 minutes, and then 113 in 23 minutes. I had to re-roll for the last episode because I didn't realize at first that the one I landed on initially was twice as long as the usual episode, and I don't got time for that. Anyway, from those 3 episodes, that's an average of 5.8 jokes per minute. Malcolm in the Middle actually had the best out of any show. It's just a testament to how well written it is that they're able to jam so many jokes in there without you even realizing it sometimes. So I counted 131 jokes, then 122, then 133, 3. All the episodes are 21 minutes. That's 6.1 jokes per minute on average. And in Schitt's Creek, kind of let me down, both numerically and also it just wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. It's very similar to Arrested Development plot-wise. It's a rich family who lost their fortune and now has to adjust to normal life. But where Arrested Development has this wide cast of varying characters, I feel like everybody in Schitt's Creek is just kind of the same person. Still pretty funny though. I laughed a few times. I like the little visual gags here and there, like them struggling with these giant menus in the pilot episode. But this one was the lowest out of the 3. I counted 111, 104, and then 112. All the episodes are 21 minutes. That's 5.2 jokes per minute. If you then average those 3 numbers together, that's about 5.7 jokes per minute in the 3 single camera shows that I watched. So now the shows with a laugh track. Starting with IT Crowd, I counted 110 jokes in 3 minutes, 137 jokes in 24 minutes, and then 106 jokes in 22 minutes. How I Met Your Mother ended up being the slowest paced show out of all of them. I counted 93, 100, and then 3 long, so it's about 4.7. Finally, The Big Bang Theory, as I predicted before, did have a lot of jokes per episode. I counted 92 in 18 minutes, 114 in 20 minutes, and then 104 in 19 minutes. Average of 5.4 jokes per minute. Better than Schitt's Creek, at least in terms of volume, but still not enough to bring the average up, works out to be about 5 jokes per minute. So I guess all that time I spent watching this episode, regular pen was not put to waste, because now it's slightly stronger statistical evidence of what I tried to prove like 2 years ago. I think my biggest takeaway though is that The Big Bang Theory does have a lot of jokes, so I guess it's well written. Alright, I gotta rant about this shit. Watch this scene.
Recharging my shields. Lesser warlord of Kaha.
That's 4 laugh tracks, and not a single joke was made. I feel like so much of the show is just a nerdy guy saying a science thing, and it's funny because of how nerdy it is. Look, I laughed a few times during the show. It's not that all of the writing is terrible. Here's a joke I thought was really good.
Open up. And who you talking to?
It's just the constant laughing at nothing that drives me crazy. And I think that's a big reason why people are so turned off by laughing. They're so overused in shows like this that it's hard to trust what you're actually watching. It's like Boy Who Cried laugh. You keep telling me something funny happened, but I don't see it. And then by the time something funny actually does happen, I don't believe it. The Big Bang Theory ran for 12 seasons. It was on the air for so long that by the time it ended, TV culture had completely changed. There seem to be way fewer sitcoms made like this anymore. Hell, even their spin-off show Young Sheldon is shot in a completely different format. It's more narrative focused, there's no studio audience. It's actually insane to me that it spawned from this.
Hey, brought Chinese.
And I brought Indian.
Even without my weird dumb math exercise, I think the general population has been subconsciously catching on to this for a while and is just not as interested in this kind of sitcom anymore. In fact, when I think back to some of the funniest shows that I've watched recently, a lot of them aren't even like straightforward comedies. Certain HBO shows like Barry and Silicon Valley, they're super funny and they're filled with comedic actors, but they also have this really compelling story going on in the background of all the jokes. Actually, the hardest I think I've laughed at a show recently is in Succession, which is this insanely well-written series with plot twists, total backstabbing, and then there's this randomly hilarious scene with Greg and Tom that I can't play or this video would get age restricted. And I think maybe that's where we as an audience have slowly shifted over the past couple decades. I can't speak for everyone obviously because everybody has their own individual taste, but for me, there's something about the juxtaposition, emotional depth, followed by jokes that break the tension. Good punchlines are important, but in order for you to actually care about what's going on, you need to get invested in the characters and their lives. Even in shows like Parks and Rec that have these relentlessly silly moments, they'll sometimes follow those up with a much more serious scene to flesh out the characters on an emotion. Like watching this one episode, I'm sitting here counting joke after joke after joke, and then all of a sudden, there's a shift with last minute or so, there's hardly any joke. Leslie wins the city council race that she's been on for the entire season up until that point, and so she gives this nice speech about how she couldn't have done it without the hard work of all her friends. They even have a great little detail in there where they show the part where she starts going off script and just speaking from the heart. And it ends up being this really nice, heartwarming moment that grounds an otherwise absurd show. And I think that's ultimately what keeps me coming back. You want to be invested in what's going on in the universe, because when you are, all of the jokes are going to hit. To bring up Parks and Rec one last time, there's another really good scene in that episode where Leslie is having this conflicting moment because she's fulfilling a lifelong dream, but she also just found out that might take a job that puts her in can feel the emotion in her face, you can empathize
Aye,
with
what
her,
did I
and then
do?
Paul Rudd comes in to break the tension. And to me, at least, the most memorable shows strike that perfect balance between funny but also there's always still going to be a place for more straightforward comedy shows.
അത്രേ ഉള്ളൂ. എൻ്റെ മോനെ
Constant,
എന്ത്
shallow
പുട്ടൻ ട്രീഡ്.
punchlines. It really just depends on what mood you're in. Sometimes you just want to laugh at something dumb. Sometimes you don't want to watch a show with emotional depth because it's like, I got my own shit going on, and now I got to care about these fictional characters too. It's interesting to me the way that television has slowly shifted away from the traditional sitcom. When you look at what's on TV right now, CBS is really the only major network with shows that still have laugh tracks. The other thing I notice a lot of these shows have in common is they almost all feature an old random actor who's been around for a very long time. Matt LeBlanc, Patricia Heaton, Cedric the Entertainer. CBS's approach is so clearly like, we're going to make shows with actors that you recognize from other shows using the same format of those shows. We realize our target demographic is people who hate change, and there's no point in trying to tailor to this new generation of people who's going to be more interested in Netflix and TikTok, no matter what. Laugh tracks are hanging on by a thread, and I don't think it'll be much longer before we look back on this era like, hey, isn't that kind of weird that we used to do that? But like a lot of things in life, it made sense for a long time, and then eventually it didn't. People change, pop culture evolves, it's inevitable. I don't know about you guys, but the show Friends has taken on a brand new role. In that the only time I watch it is when I'm trying to fall asleep. There's something about the static, predictable rhythm, very low volume, that puts my mind at ease. So I guess that's all I really have to say about this topic. Though the other thing that was the crazy constant person, and has it someone else who tries to sell it. The true good channel will return to your word. I'm depressed. You may know me as founder of Romeo of Silverdrag-N, website that was recently featured on Forbes' Top 1 Under 1 list. For the past several months, people have been raving about the delicious toppings available on my site, from mustard to pickle to basketball. We have options spanning almost none of the food. But through all the praise, one demand has remained consistent. The hot dog is simply in desperate need of a makeover. So I gave it. Click the Make It Beautiful button to go see just how stunning this wiener can truly be. But Drew, you're dumb. How did you make a website? Well, I'll tell you. I used believe it was Aristotle who once said, great idea for a website. Although I obviously just made that up, he would have had a pretty good point if he did. Squarespace is an easy-to-use all-in-one platform that'll help you turn your idea into a reality without any coding experience necessary. It's as simple as selecting a template from one of the great options and then just tweaking things from there until you're satisfied. You don't even have to worry about adjusting it for cell phone users either, because each template comes with a mobile optimized version automatically. Whether you decided a landing page for your portfolio or a storefront that helps you profit off your work, Squarespace has every tool you possibly need to make a website that looks and functions exactly the way you need it to. For about a year, I used to sell my own version of a website I made with Squarespace, and it was a super seamless experience the entire time. They partnered with ShipStation, which is a service that allows me to print shipping labels on bulk and check them off in advance, which saved me literally hours of work. You can set up multiple different payment methods, accepted currencies, customers create accounts so you can check out faster than getting an exact amount about any sales or new products you have. These are just a few of the many great things. I promise you, sign up for the website. Squarespace is going to help you. To get started with a 7-day free trial, head to squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch your brand new website, use promo code DREW for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now you guys may go check out my new beautiful hot dog. I know you're dying to see it. It's a good thing commercials are only on TV and not on the internet. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. It means a lot that you're willing to look at and or listen to me for about 10 to 20 minutes at a time. Be sure to tune in next week for a video where I do the same exact exercise as I did in this one, only instead of sitcoms, I go back and calculate my own YouTube video. Not to spoil anything, but I hear the number ends up being so much lower than I was hoping that it makes me cry, and I quit making YouTube videos. Alright, see you then.
Till death I said hello.
When I was a kid, I don't think there was anything I was more obsessed with than Star Wars. Star Wars birthday cake, Star Wars birthday costume, Star Wars, Darth Maul, Taco Bell Cup. Practically all I ever did was watch these movies while playing with the toys that were based on these movies. The great thing about the original 3 movies is that they still hold up today. They're exciting to watch, they're full of great performances, they've got an iconic soundtrack, there's hardly any incest in them. And it's crazy to think how much of what was made at this point more than 40 years ago is still acting as the sun around which every new piece of Star Wars media revolves. So like 4 characters created that get shoehorned into every new scene, every Star Wars, even as one of the largest brands in the world, cannot seem to exist without them. They cannot create anything without a Skywalker, or an Obi-Wan, or a Yoda, or a Darth Vader, and they're barely even trying to. It honestly seems like their entire goal at this point is to just be like, remember this guy? Remember this guy? And if this is all they're gonna do with the brand, what is even the point? If every new show is only going to exist as a way to remind us of something we've already seen, how much more Star Wars do we need? Now, I'm certainly not about to sit here and act like I'm somehow immune to nostalgia
let's go.
because that would be a lie. When Disney released the first trailer for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, I was ecstatic. Ewan McGregor was always one of my favorite things about the prequel trilogy, and I could not wait to see him come back and play this character again. But then the weirdest thing happened. The show came out, and it ended up being so boring I stopped watching after 2 episodes and didn't think about it again for an entire year. Turns out bringing back a recognizable character is a pretty good way to get people to pay attention to something. But you still have to put in a little bit of effort. For one, I was shocked at how cheap everything looked. I know they didn't quite have a movie budget for this, but it's not like they were working with nothing. But it's so bland and gray and dark. A lot of the action sequences are nauseating to watch because of the artificial camera shake they threw in. What is this even supposed to convey? That the cameraman is scared? It just looks stupid. And of course the production problems could be overlooked if there was a story worth telling here, but I think they forgot to come up with one. None of the characters are interesting, including the one that should have been a slam dunk. You somehow took a character that's existed in people's heads for over 40 years and wrote him to be so flat that I can't remember a single thing he said or did in the show. There's no fear instilled by the antagonists because they're completely incompetent. The writing is inconsistent and the rules change from scene to scene. 4 stormtroopers, huh? Piece of cake for a guy like me. Oh fuck, 3 stormtroopers? I give up. Don't shoot! Damn. If only they brought a 4th guy. This also happens just a few seconds after he tries way too hard to open a gate they very clearly could have just walked around. Did that fight give him a concussion? In episode 4, Obi-Wan has to go save Leia from her imprisonment on what is described as an extremely secure base.
It's impenetrable, Wade.
Suicide.
You're not getting in there.
Yeah, it looks pretty secure to me. They've got an entire droid patrolling the place. Not to mention multiple doors that are unlocked.
It's impenetrable.
Okay, well, he made it into the base, but there's no way they're getting out of there. Look how conspicuous they're being. Surely someone will notice the human child hiding under his jacket. No one sees that? Are their helmets on backwards? Oh, there we go. Now they're screwed. They are completely surrounded by stormtroopers. There's no way they're getting out of this. They got away. Everything worked out. And it's not because they came up with like a strategic plan or anything. They just lowered the difficulty to easy and ran straight to the ship. This show feels like it was reverse engineered. They knew people liked this character, so they decided to make a series about him, and then it's like, we'll figure out a plot for it later on. Sure, the show came out last summer. And we're so close to figuring out a
Live from New York, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, welcome back to Lorne Michaels' basement. He told me he wouldn't let me out of here until I made another video about his show. So I'm a big SNL fan, and I'm not just saying that because of the current hostage situation. I've actually been watching it since I was a kid. I'm one of the biggest defenders of the show. I love it for what it is. I like the format. I like the excitement of doing a live show and discovering new, young, talented people. And I'm always impressed by the work that goes into it, like building giant set pieces and elaborate props in just a few short days every week. That being said, there's still plenty to criticize about the show, from some of their questionable hosting choices to the painfully cringy sketches they roll out from time to time. But nothing is more annoying to me than the blanket statement that SNL hasn't been funny in 20 years, no, 50 years. Hell, they haven't made me laugh since 1932, when One-Eyed Leslie did his world-famous Calvin Coolidge impression. Those were the good old days. These are the type of comments you'll hear on random YouTube videos, SNL's Instagram page, or shouted from someone's friend. And I've always been curious to go back and see what all the fuss is about. The way these people describe the show would make you think it looks like this, when in reality I would bet it's a little bit more like this. And now that every episode ever made is available on Peacock, a service I will stop using the moment I'm done with this video, I figured why don't I go back and actually watch some of these episodes. Only then can I give an accurate take on the evolution of the show. Here goes nothing. The very first episode of Saturday Night Live looked a lot different than what would become of the show. The host was comedian George Carlin, and he didn't appear in any of the sketches. He just did a few sets of stand-up in between them and introduced the musical acts, which included 2 really great performances from Billy Preston. I liked a lot of his jokes, but there was one line in particular that influenced how I watched the rest of the episodes.
Do you ever look at the crowds in old movies and wonder if they're dead yet?
God damn it, now I'm gonna do that. The pilot was more of a true variety show, in the literal sense of the word. You had some stand-up, a bunch of songs, this classic bit by Andy Kaufman, who had no affiliation with the show and came on just to do this, a random Muppet sketch, and even a short film just thrown into the middle. It seemed like the goal of this was to appeal to as many people as possible and quickly move on from thing to thing, just in case the audience might start dozing off. This was actually one of the first things I noticed about the episodes was how short the sketches were. For the most part, they were just one joke. Setup, punchline, move on to the next. They were definitely just as hit or miss as SNL has always been, but this is a pretty far cry from the current shows where every other sketch goes on just a little bit too long. For a pilot episode, this was a pretty fun time all around and had a good flow to it. I hope they get picked up for season 2. Okay, forget what I said about the sketches being too short. I guess they stopped doing that. The worst one in this episode went on for almost 12 minutes. And it didn't really have like a theme or a joke.
Welcome.
It was just a bunch of wacky characters taking turns being wacky. The audience seemed to like a lot of these sketches, but most of them didn't really do it for me. My favorite part was Steve Martin's monologue. Alright, you'll probably be seeing a lot of him in this video because he used to host the show all the time, and he's also one of my favorite comedians. Guess who hosted this season? That's right, O.J. Simpson. If you don't know who O.J. is, he was a football player turned movie star, and then nothing else of note happened. He did a pretty good job on the show, but man, 70s humor is just not for me. The lead-off sketch in this episode was John Belushi as a samurai. Understand why the whole thing culminated in a big dance number. Bill Murray's on the show now, which is cool, but I think my favorite cast member from this era is Jane Kirk. I love her delivery, and I could definitely see how she ended up inspiring a bunch of younger writers and comedians like Tina Fey. I thought this joke was hilarious about a former attorney general who was being given a 2-week furlough from prison in order to get hip replacement surgery.
According to our sources, Mitchell's secret plan is to systematically replace every limb, organ, joint, and gland in his body. Send his new version back to prison, thus allowing the original to visit himself on weekends.
Be ready to eliminate hostiles.
This was an easy choice. Carrie Fisher hosted season 4. She was fresh off the success of Star Wars, which was like a space movie from the 70s. It kind of flew under. She had to play Princess Leia in her monologue and the first sketch, which was set in the 50s. I love watching older generations make fun of even older generations. I don't know, it's like a time capsule within a time. Nothing in this episode really stood out to me though, but it was fun to see a young Carrie Fisher get to play a bunch of characters. I will say the worst sketch in this one made me feel like I was watching a Lele Pons video because everybody was just yelling.
Who's the young man you're seeing tonight? His name's Ram!
Okay, so I've watched 5 episodes so far, and I would put the hit rate at about 15 to 20%, which is not so good. All of their pre-recorded bits, or analog shorts, if you will, are almost unwatchable because of how bad they look. This one in particular was just what every child makes when they get their first camera for Christmas.
Oh.
I do enjoy the sketches that feel very Steve Martin-y. He has a particular style that I think is timeless. This bit where a Roman army kept getting pranked by vandals who like TP'd them and ordered anchovy pizzas and made them pay for it was pretty silly. I like it. But in just a few short months, things at SNL were about to get weird. In season 6, the show got turned upside down. Lorne Michaels left because he was feeling burnt out, and his successor fired the entire cast and replaced them with 15 new people, 12 of whom only lasted one season. The show changed too dramatically, was hated by people who stuck around to watch it, and the ratings plummeted. For the next year, NBC was on the verge of canceling SNL altogether, which would have made this video a lot shorter. Whenever I hear someone say that SNL hasn't been funny since the 70s, I now picture them watching this season and then writing off the show forever. I watched the first episode and it feels like a weird dream. It's so strange seeing something that looks like Saturday Night Live, but not recognizing a single face besides Elliot. There's something so amateur about the whole thing. It almost feels like I'm watching a political episode of all that. It probably didn't help that they introduced newcomer Charles Rocket as
kind of a cross between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray,
which is an unbelievably high bar, especially for someone so charismatic and bad at jokes.
How about that, huh? The Rings of Saturn.
It's no wonder they only let him do 5 episodes of Weekend Update.
Hamilton Jordan created the new Secretary of State designate and his vice. Pictured here are Hannah Hayes.
Oh no, she sucks too! Anyway, I think deciding my favorite sketch was the nose wrestling competition, or when these shoes get Jesus Christ. It seemed like they were simultaneously trying to distance themselves from the SNL of the past. For example, they renamed Weekend Update as Newsbreak, while also latching on to anything they could to offer recognition to longtime viewers. Sure, we may not have Bill Murray anymore, but we do have his brother. I would describe this period as the pun era, because boy did they love those.
A crazed reindeer can inflict sleigh bees.
Honestly, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Eddie Murphy might have single-handedly saved the show. He was one of the only cast members to survive this season, and obviously ended up being one of the biggest stars people think of when they talk about SNL. Danny DeVito hosted in '82, and they threw him into a sketch called The Whiners. Can you guess what their thing is?
But it'll stick out.
Be ready to engage Op 4.
That's right. They whine.
It's still cold.
Now imagine watching 5 minutes of it. Rick Moranis hosted in '83, but not by himself. I've never seen dual hosts before. Oh, please, God, no, not the whiners again. Finally, Robin Williams hosted in '84, and they let him do Weekend Update, which had again been rebranded, this time as SNL News. I think they were just looking for any excuse not to have their regular anchor Brad Hall do it, because he was boring. Once again, Eddie is pretty much carrying the show on his back at this point. I can't imagine how much worse it would be without him. Hey, speaking of back, Lauren is, and SNL's finally good again. Just kidding. The '85 season is almost an even bigger disaster than 1980. Did you know Robert Downey Jr. was on the cast this year? Huh? It's pretty crazy how forgettable his time was, but the whole theme of this season is crazy. The main difference between this and season 6 is that this time they tried to play into the absurdity a little bit, sort of winking at the audience as if to say, yeah, this season's a little weird, but we know that it's weird.
NBC has asked me to read the following statement concerning last year's entire season. It was all a dream, a horrible, horrible dream.
And I think their self-awareness only worked here because they were able to quickly transition back into being pretty solid again. '86 was Dana Carvey's first season, and he stood out immediately. You also had Kevin Nealon, Victoria Jackson, Phil Hartman. In 1987, they hired 3 new writers, Bob Odenkirk, Greg Daniels, and Conan O'Brien, which is like an all-star team. Some of the sketches from this period are so silly that I feel like they have to have been written by either Bob or Conan. I feel like I remember seeing this a long time ago. I opened season 14 with a sketch about a bank giving out change, but they basically just keep listing different combinations.
We are not going to give you change that you don't want. If you come to us with a $100 bill, we're not going to give you 2,000 nickels, unless that meets your particular change needs.
And it works because of how earnest he is.
We will give you the change equal to the amount of money that you want.
I actually ended up watching multiple shows from 1988 because this was easily my favorite season so far. Matthew Broderick's monologue was great. He turned it into a lesson on how to do a monologue. And then, I don't know why I like this one so much, but they did one where he was nervous to go to a nude beach, but his friend assured him that in 5 minutes, you'll completely forget that you're naked. And then the rest of the sketch was like this.
I'd like you guys to meet Doug. Hey, Doug.
Hi, guys.
Hey, pretty small penis there.
It's such a simple idea, but I thought they pulled it off very well.
You want to see my pictures from Barbados? Yeah, sure. All right, there I am with some friends on a catamaran. Penis looks great.
I think that's how you could describe a lot of the good sketches. Simple ideas that were just well executed. Fuses the driving cat is another favorite of mine.
Driving test.
One friendly reminder.
Do you think Toon Sizzle passes driving test?
I don't know, that written part is pretty hard.
Maybe he'll make up for it on the driving part.
Damn, I wish I could help.
There's also the commercial for long white beard, which you can wear sarcastically when you're trying to show someone they can wait. In 1989, Rick Moranis hosted again with a monologue that made me out of breath just watching it. But my favorite sketch was at the end, where the new MLB commissioner holds a meeting about how they're going to honor the former commissioner who had died a couple months prior.
I request that the players of each team wear black armbands with Bart's initials in honor of this great man.
But then they just keep listing more and more things they're gonna name after him until it gets totally ridiculous.
And left field, Bart's favorite position, will be known as Bartland, USA.
I can definitely see why people consider the late 80s to be one of the first golden eras of SNL. There was a really great combination of talented writers and performers who were open to silly ideas that I think are still funny today. It also helped the show revive its reputation after a tumultuous start to the decade. It didn't take long for them to transition into their second golden era, which was the early 90s. The cast now included Chris Farley, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler, David Spade, Mike Myers, all of whom went on to become big stars in one way or another. If I'm being honest though, I think this period is a little overrated. Chris Farley was electric. Everything he was in was better because he was in it. But other than that, I feel like people assume this period was good because of the names. Like Adam Sandler, he was hilarious back then. Right?
That was 10 years ago!
You see, he and SNL have a similar reputation in that a lot of people think they're not funny now, but they used to be. I just don't know if Adam Sandler has ever been that funny. He's extremely likable on the show, and I think that's why so many people gravitated towards him. But he's not a great joke writer, and a lot of his iconic characters from the time seem like something a teenager would come up with. I think he's made a couple really good movies, a few pretty good movies, and a handful of fun songs on SNL. But the best thing he ever did was surround himself with the most beloved sketches from this era are ones in which Chris Farley is doing 100% of the headline, and that's fine. That's how it works. I just think his contribution to SNL gets a little overstated because of the notoriety that comes with his name. I also feel like the writing dipped here despite all of the talent from the cast, not named Rob Schneider. Once they found a character people liked, they would drive that shit into the ground. A tradition that, to be fair, has continued ever since. The first time Chris Farley did Matt Foley is probably one of the best SNL sketches ever. His physicality, the other actors slowly breaking, the palpable excitement from the audience, it's impossible to watch this without smiling. But then they did it 7 more times in 3 years, and it got a little less fun every time. Overall, I feel like the sketches stopped being as creative as they were in the late 80s. Like they were taking fewer chances. There was a lot of stoner jokes, which was like a comedy cheat code at the time. They'll just throw one of the guys in a dress, and that's the entire. The risky, oddball ideas were fewer and more far between, but when they did come, they were great. Phil Hartman as the unfrozen caveman lawyer got a good chuckle out of me. Sketches like this are always going to be more memorable than like teenage kids telling their mom to shut up, or guys who hide weed in antiques.
Put your weed in there. And you put your weed in there. You put your weed in there.
You know, I take it back. Maybe the smartest thing Adam Sandler ever did was stand in the same room as Rob Schneider, since everyone around him seemed funny in comparison. Despite such a large, star-studded cast, in 1995 the show was in danger of being canceled yet again, and NBC forced Lorne to fire Adam Sandler and Chris Farley, I think because at that point they were making more money than ever. Lucky for them, it took all of 1 season to find replacements in Tim Meadows, Molly Shannon, Chris Kattan, Daryl Hammond, Anna Gasteyer, and of course Will Ferrell, who became the new face of the show. I wouldn't say they hit their stride right away, though. Will stood out pretty quickly, but it wasn't until a couple years in that the sketches started getting successful. Steve Buscemi hosted in '98, and in his monologue, he tried to prove that he wasn't just a serious actor by doing improv comedy.
Okay, audience, let's try another location.
Nursery school?
Now that sucks.
Surprisingly, my favorite sketch in this episode was a fake Disney movie trailer where they turned the Titanic into an animated musical for kids.
Don't miss Titan, or your child will hate you.
Growing up, I always hated these animated sketches. The worst sound to hear in the middle of the show was this, because I knew I was not gonna like it. But this one was alright. When Weekend Update rolled around, I was very confused when Colin Quinn showed up. I thought I was familiar with every Weekend Update host. I was wrong. Apparently, Norm Macdonald got fired mid-season because he made too many O.J. Simpson jokes, and one of NBC's executives was friends with O.J. If that story is true, it's funnier than anything this guy said in his 2 years on the show. Finally, in '99, Tobey Maguire hosted, which I thought was weird because I didn't think he became a big star until Spider-Man came out a few years later. He did a couple impressions the audience really loved. Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves, you look rather pleased. Let's see what you wrote down. Nothing. The question was right, anything, and you got it wrong.
And Screech from Saved by the Bell. He was a natural, and Will Ferrell was also really great in this episode. There's a reason why he's the defining member of this cast. If I had to pick, I'd say the 2 worst parts of this episode were Jimmy Fallon as Hilary Swank. I'm a girly now. And this sketch with a Ariel Terry character named Nadine. Now, if you're a little older, you might be thinking, wait, I remember that character. She's the Sarah Down now. I loved those sketches. And I would just say, maybe go back and watch the whole thing. Although I enjoyed her performance here, I love that the joke is that they say simmer down now like 30 times.
Simmer down now! Tell David on the seatbelt, simmer down now too!
This style of catchphrase comedy has been one of my least favorite parts of SNL, and something I think has plagued the show for the past 3 decades. Okay. There's a difference between repeating a joke but tightening it each time, and just saying the same thing over and over and over and over. This happened again in the next episode I watched with Conan. I was really excited about this. I didn't even know he had ever hosted, but one of the first sketches they did was him as Molecular Man, where he just kept on repeating his catchphrase. I get that the joke was that he was giving away his identity every time he would say that, but it was still kind of annoying. It's okay though, they made up for it by doing this sketch where he's a doctor.
Hello there, Mr. Berenois Brown.
Who has to break the news to his patient that in order to save his life in surgery, they had to remove his taint.
Are you talking about my fleshy fun bridge? You bastard! You butchered me!
Horatio Sands is so good. If he didn't sell it as well as he did, it wouldn't have worked at all, but his devastation is hilarious.
Oh, he can't work. He lost his taint. No.
This was another fantastic cast. While most of them didn't turn into big movie stars like the cast from the early 90s did, they were all really funny. Perfect no longer in your possession. You had Rachel Dratch, Maya Rudolph, Tracy Morgan, Chris Parnell, and Tina Fey started doing Update with Jimmy Fallon, who I guess just woke up from a nap. The Britney Spears episode in 2002 was really good. She nailed Barbie, which may not sound like a compliment, but it is. She was really funny in this, right down to the arm movement. I also like this sketch about a news show where everything kept going wrong, and the rest of the episode was forgettable. Will Ferrell moved on from SNL after this season, but I think he left the show in pretty good hands, with Fred Armisen and Will Forte joining at the same time in season 28. You know, as much as I'd love to see Al Gore, John McCain, or Jeff Gordon host, what the fuck happened here? I went with another Britney, this time Murphy. I actually do kind of like the Leatherman sketches that Jimmy and Horatio did, but you're not gonna believe it. They actually broke character during it. What? I've never seen them do that before. 2 of the most popular SNL sketches of all time came when Lindsay Lohan hosted in 2004, but I was more interested in watching the Olsen twins host the season finale together.
New York Minute's a very good movie.
You know what? Never mind. Tom Brady hosted in season 30. Wow, is there anything this guy can't do?
I am the barely shuffling guy. Shut all down, don't ask
10 seconds to go.
Comedy. Maybe he really is human after all. For some reason, season 31 barely exists online. The longest episode available is only 26 minutes, and a third of it is Dane Cook's stand-up. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very excited for this episode as a kid. And seeing this turtleneck sketch again brought back a memory I forgot I had. Actually,
you must recover
my friend about this skit the following Monday, hyping both it and Dane Cook as the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Everyone makes mistakes. The best part of this episode, at least that's been preserved on the internet, is this Taco Town digital short.
Pizza? Now that's what I call a taco.
And that brings me to the most formative years of my SNL memory. What do they say about SNL? Everybody's favorite cast is the one from when they were a teenager. Well, I was 12 in 2006. So this was my favorite. Part of the reason I wanted to make this video was actually to go back and watch these episodes in full to see if they are really as great as I remember them being, or if I'm doing what the generation before me does to the end. And wouldn't you know it, these episodes aren't perfect either. I've been lied to by my own brain. I chose the Matthew Fox episode. I've actually been rewatching Lost recently, and I wanted to relive what it was like when that show was America's biggest cultural phenomenon. I like the Lost-related sketch, and I always thought the MTV4 show they did was pretty funny. In this one, Maya sang a song called Tiny Moves, where she did tiny dance moves, but the rest of the show fell kind of flat. In 2008, Shia LaBeouf hosted, which made this a pretty easy choice for me. Part of the fun of SNL is how they preserve specific moments from these celebrities' peaks of stardom. Also, I remember liking this episode. There were 3 really great sketches: an old game show that turned into a murder investigation, a scared straight bit with Keenan, and this one where Shia and Andy buy drinks for 2 women who are very enamored with them.
Well, why choose one when you can have them all?
Oh, you mean an 8-way?
When it rains, it pours.
Also, I never really liked the Vinny DiVecchi sketches growing up because I didn't understand them, but watching them as an adult, I appreciate them a lot.
Play more up!
He never has any lines, but he's always in the background just eating spaghetti. I do have to dock a couple points for having probably the worst digital short out of the 100 or so that they made. There's a reason I have no memory of this. Speaking of young celebrities in the peak of their stardom, Zac Efron hosted in 2009 and performed a bunch of sketches that SNL's YouTube page has probably recommended to you at some point. There's the bar that doesn't card, which Zach and Andy think is really cool until they realize there's like 8-year-olds in here.
Whoa, whoa, careful guys.
15 seconds.
They're gerbils.
Gerbils?
Yeah, it's the opposite of cougars.
There's Troy
10
Bolton
seconds.
going back to East
The
High
user
to
is
warn
active,
everyone that
protected at all
nobody
costs.
sings in college. Everybody in this school got a terrible education.
I learned that I have to play the stereotypes that people have for me. I can be a jock and a dancer.
What's the capital of Texas?
Last operator standing.
Texas City?
And finally, this one with Fred Armisen. The next season had my favorite of John Hamm's 3 times hosting, though this is one of those episodes that's a little rough on rewatch because it's like way too long political cold open, boring topical sketch that is obviously no longer topical. And now that that's out of the way, we can get to the funny stuff. Like this sketch that I've always loved with the musical guest Michael Bublé called Ham and Bubbly, a pork/champagne restaurant they started where you slowly realize that John is holding him hostage.
If you could find a better place for pork and champagne, keep it to yourself.
Then there was a commercial for the Closet Organizer, which is just Will Forte in a blue morph suit.
Stars! Dockers! Water! All it needs is 2 meals a day and a little bucket to do its business in.
And then you forget about that for a minute, you watch this sketch with Fred Armisen as a distracting courtroom stenographer, and then they end the show with something I've never seen on SNL.
I know you from somewhere. Are you on TV?
A callback to one of the sketches from earlier.
You're the freaking closet organizer guy, aren't you? Marbles! Pies, pies, pies!
In season 36, Emma Stone hosted, and she's one of those people like John Hamm and Ryan Gosling that elevate the episode whenever they're on. Some guests you kind of have to work around and give them small parts in things and not too many wordy lines. So it's always nice when the host can carry a sketch on their own, especially when the show's trying to navigate cast turnover. This season had a lot of Abby Elliott and Paul Britton, 2 people who never really made a huge impact on anything. This Weekend Update was also great. They had Stefan and also John Mulaney as himself, something he did twice while writing for the show.
I love to watch any movie that stars an animal because the animal does not know that it is in a movie.
Daniel Radcliffe was really good in season 37. They did a Harry Potter sketch where he's sort of a has-been at Hogwarts but doesn't want to accept it. But my favorite was probably Spin the Bottle.
Make sure it lands on me.
I'll try.
Bobby Moynihan was awesome on SNL, and I miss him a lot.
Where'd you come from? I fell from heaven. JK. The woods.
And finally, season 38 was the last season for Fred, Bill, and Jason Sudeikis. So this truly was the end of an era. Obviously, Bill and Fred were dynamic performers who had a massive impact on the show, but I think Jason was a huge loss as well. It's easy to overlook the importance of the regular dude in sketches. You don't always realize how valuable they were until they're gone. Since then, they've tried to fill those roles with Taron Killam and Mikey Day, but Jason had such adaptability to able to fully replace it. Anyway, I chose the Bruno Mars episode, and outside of the monologue song, a sketch about creepy animatronics, and the surprisingly earnest sad mouse, there wasn't anything here to write home about. Now,
down to 10 seconds.
Flopping back! Sometimes when I think about modern SNL, I think, you know, they're still kind of in a transitional phase. There's still great stuff out there, and I realize it's been like 9 years already. You know, if I'm rewatching the shows, I realize a lot of them aren't even that bad, or at least not that much worse than the shows I've spent the past 2 years watching. The cast is still extremely talented, although maybe not always used in the best way. But this period had Kate McKinnon, Bobby Moynihan, Aidy Bryant, Vanessa Bayer, who was super underrated, and Taron Killam had some really funny characters that killed every time. A lot of this, though, I appreciate more in hindsight. I was less excited to watch SNL at the time, and often didn't. And yeah, I think it dropped a little bit in quality, but that had more to do with the fact that I was like 20 years old at that point, and I was more critical of the things I watched. So I completely understand why people older than me did the same thing to the mid-2000s cast that I grew up on. So 2013 to 2016 is sort of the modern SNL, but pre-Trump era. And I feel like it was like right when they were starting to find their comedic comes Alec Baldwin. Now, I've talked about this before, but one misconception people have is that SNL got political in 2016. In the past few weeks, I've watched them make fun of Obama, Hillary Clinton, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Al Gore, Mitt Romney, George Bush 1 and 2, and now they make fun of Biden.
Kamala Harris will become the first vice president to be featured as a wax figure at Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Joe Biden is the first wax figure to become president.
And sure, like a lot of people, I prefer the non-political sketches, but let's not act like this is some new thing they're trying. It's like saying I used to like SNL until they started having musical guests. Personally, my biggest issue with how SNL handled the Trump era was just that they hired out. Of course they're gonna make sketches about Donald Trump, but you have all these new cast members on the show trying to make a name for themselves, and then you overshadow all of them by bringing on Alec Baldwin to play the guy who was already getting 24/7 media coverage. So I understand why this would cause casual viewers of the show to think that 1, they've gotten more political now, and 2, the current cast isn't very good. Both of those are the result of this. But despite often being overshadowed by Alec Baldwin and Jim Carrey, I do think the current cast and writers have done some pretty solid work. Michael and Colin are great together, even though it took them a couple years to not be terrible at update. And although Kyle doesn't always have a huge role on the show, I think Beck has been a perfect cast member because of how versatile he is. Melissa Villaseñor is constantly hilarious. Bowen Yang is already looking like a star in the making. And now they've got this guy, who people DM me to say they thought was me, just because we have the same face, name, and hairstyle. But of course, I couldn't talk about modern SNL.
Loading time! What I say right now might be a little cringe.
10 seconds to insertion. 5 seconds and counting.
This episode was awful. I hated it. It was so difficult to watch that I was actually relieved when Chad showed up. I hate Chad. Even in this terrible episode, the sketch about how all our conversations sound the same now was spot on.
One dinner outdoors and one dinner indoors. Do I have
But I'm not going to sit here and say that it was a good episode, because it wasn't. I don't think they should have had him on in the first place, although I understand why they did. It's just what SNL does. Every so often, someone controversial will come home, whether it's Rudy Giuliani in 1997, a former board game mascot Donald Trump in 2015, wait, what? That's the guy who makes self-driving cars and self-exploding spacecraft. He's not This is gonna be great. So then more people watch than usual. It's the talk of the town. And everyone picks the worst sketch of the bunch of Twitter and satisfy the Flex Brigade. And it's a shame, though not a surprise, that this episode got all the attention because they followed it up the next week with Keegan-Michael Key, an iconic sketch performer
who brought the exact opposite energy to the show. And then a season finale with Anya Taylor-Joy that had so many extra bits that I think their best episode of the year. I love this rerun of an old game show where they kind of cut parts out because celebrities turn out to be terrible people. I love Matt Damon, who's my favorite celebrity, Vin Diesel.
When the movie's not loud enough.
The whole segment was hilarious and culminated in Andy Sesame. There's a very specific group of people who say SNL's not funny. They haven't done anything funny.
All friendlies were eliminated.
But then every once in a while they'll be like, this is the funniest thing SNL's done in 20 years. This is the funniest thing SNL's done in 20 years. This is the funniest. This is the funniest thing. This is the funniest thing. How many times do you get to say that before realizing maybe the show is still funny sometimes, and my hyperbolic catchphrase isn't as accurate as I thought? So if we're asking the question, is SNL worse now than it's ever been? The answer is no. It's the same as it's always been. The difference is, in 1992, if there was a terrible, unfunny sketch, and there were, people forgot about it the next day. A lot of the reason there's this generation that looks back on the 80s and 90s with rose-colored glasses is because these sketches have been viewed retroactively in the form of best-of DVDs and shortened reruns on VH1, where they condense the episode down into the 3 funniest sketches and the rest quietly disappear off the face of the earth. Nowadays, it takes 5 minutes for a sketch to get ripped onto Twitter and quote retweeted into oblivion. Every failure that happens on the show will get torn to shreds. Not necessarily because it's so much worse than it's ever been, but because now it's so much easier to shit all over things. That's like 70% of what the internet, Twitter, and my YouTube channel is. Nostalgia is a drug that causes us to misconstrue our memories. It's human nature to look back on things more fondly because old thing good and new thing bad. And because of its longevity, SNL will always fall victim to this. But more often than not, it's an illusion. I guarantee you this will happen again in another decade when people are like, SNL hasn't been funny since the 2010s. Remember Kate McKinnon, Cecily Strong, Beck, and Kyle? Those dudes were stars. This new cast stinks, and they do way too many sketches about President Carlson. When did SNL get so political? My point isn't that you're wrong to not like Saturday Night Live. I love the show, and I will be the first to admit that sometimes it sucks ass. And admittedly, it can feel kind of weird to defend something with a success percentage that would only be impressive if this was baseball. Your time is valuable, and if staying up to watch this show live is not worth it to you, I can't blame you. All I'm saying is, if you're gonna criticize the show, at least try to do it with even a hair of nuance. I agree that at this point there are dozens of other shows and independent YouTubers who make funnier sketches than what you'll see on a random SNL episode. And I think it's natural to for those things. But it is a little unfair when you consider the process of how they get made. Most sketch shows get worked on for weeks or months at a time. They're written, rewritten, recorded, edited, rewritten again until they're perfect. And if something doesn't turn out the way the writers expected it to, it probably never sees the light. SNL doesn't have that luxury. The writers are up for 19 straight hours on Tuesday trying to come up with an idea good enough to make the host laugh, and then they narrow it down to 8 or 9 on Wednesday, and that's pretty much what ends up in the show. So if any of the sketches seem like the insane ramblings of someone who's dangerously sleep deprived, it's probably because they are. I'm pretty sure the only reason that Wario courtroom sketch ever happened was because Elon was like, I want to play a Mario character. And then a couple of the writers spent like an hour and a half trying to make something funny. Like I said, it can feel pretty weird defending something that is so often not good. I like to think that I have pretty good taste when it comes to comedy, so a lot of people, when they find out I enjoy this show, are like, really? You like this? Just know, most people who watch SNL are also critical of them. I don't sit there laughing my ass off at every joke regardless of if it's funny or not. But it's kind of like being a fan of a sports team. They're not going to win every game. Some seasons are better than others, and it sucks when you see your favorite players move on to a different team. But no matter what, I almost always find something to root for. There's nights where it's like, that episode was kind of rough, but Kyle really shined. Or Chloe had those 2 really funny sketches. That's part of why I enjoy watching. It's fun to root for these young comedians and watch them get better over time. then one of them ends up in a big movie a few years later. And you're like, I remember watching you when people said, who's this girl? She sucks. But you always believed. You were there from the beginning. And I understand that that kind of thing does not matter to a lot of people, but I like it. SNL is not the pinnacle of comedy, but it's also not the worst show ever made. And if you still feel absolutely certain that the old shows were perfect and these shows are not, I would encourage you to go back and watch a random full episode from your favorite season, and you will see that your memory is playing tricks on you. Anyway, I have rambled for 6 hours. Jeez. I hope you like this video. I spent pretty much all month on it, so I would appreciate it if you commented something like, you suck, idiot, SNL trash like you. That would mean the world to me. That being said, I do have bills to pay, and NBC will probably put a copyright strike on this video, so please enjoy this word from today's sponsor. Hi, I'm Walker, and I'm founder and CEO of pictureofhotdog.com, this year's winner of the website. I know, I see your comments. True, pictureofhotdog.com hasn't been funny since the 90s, and I'm sorry. I agree. So to try and recapture some of that vintage magic, I've decided to add a brand new topping, 90s outfit. That was before he went bald. As always, I couldn't have made this website without the help of today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the best way to make the website of your dreams, whether it's an online store where you sell clothes to bugs, or a blog you want to write about all the books you've read and everything in between. Where they really shine though is as an online store. I used to sell my own merch on a website that I built with Squarespace, and it was such a simple process that even without any web design experience, I had no issues. From creating your look, setting prices and inventory limits, and showing related products under other products, viewing all the analytics you could ever need. They even partner with ShipStation, which is a life-saving feature that helps organize all your shipping labels so you can print them in bulk. So if you're interested in taking your business or creative endeavor to the next level, you can go to squarespace.com/Drew to get started with a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your website, use my promo code Drew for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and be sure to check out pictureofhotdog.com at pictureofhotdog.com.
എനിവേസ് എന്തായാലും ഇന്നത്തെ ഡീരീസ് തീർന്നു ഒരു ലെവലിൽ കൂടി. സോ ഐ ഗസ് ഇന്നത്തേക്ക് ഞാൻ നിർത്തുകയാണ്. വേറെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചൊന്നും പറയാനില്ല. എനിവേസ് എനിക്ക് വയ്യ ആൻഡ് തൽക്കാലം നിർത്തുവോ. ആൻഡ് പതിവ് പോലെ ഗുഡ് ബൈ ജിജീസ് ആൻഡ് ടു ബി കണ്ടിന്യൂഡ്. ബൈ ബൈ.